I will start by talking about the significance of Deepavali, because Bhagavan has composed some verses on it. Deepavali is probably the most, certainly one of the most popular and widespread festivals in India. It's celebrated by Hindus and also by Jains, some Buddhists, Sikhs. So it's a very widespread festival. The name Deepavali, Deepa means light. Avali means a series. So it's a series of lights. And on that day, it is celebrated both in temples and in homes by lighting numerous oil lamps. And also in later times, it came to be associated with fireworks. It's fireworks day in India. In North India, it's called, the festival is more popularly known as Diwali, which is a Hindi word, which is a contraction of the original Sanskrit name. Deepavali got contracted as Diwali. And that's the name by which it's also widely known abroad. As with everything in Hinduism and in India, there are many different versions. There are different versions of the stories. The festival is associated with different stories, and it's also celebrated in many different ways. In some parts of India, it's considered as the celebration of the time when Rama returned to Ayodhya after rescuing his wife Sita and defeating Ravana. When he returned to Ayodhya, his kingdom, it's celebrated as that. In North India, it's very much associated with Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and abundance. In South India, it's predominantly associated with the killing of Narakasura by Krishna. But in other parts of India, I think in Bengal, they, according to their versions of the stories, it was Kali who killed Narakasura. Narakasura was a demon who had conquered all the three worlds, that is the heaven, the earth, and the underworld. And he was giving much trouble to not only to all beings on earth, but also to the gods in heaven and to the creatures in the lower nether regions. So according to the version where it was Krishna who killed, the gods came and pleaded with the gods and the rishis and others came and pleaded with Vishnu to protect them from Narakasura. And he said when he took birth as Krishna, he would do so. All these, as I say, there are many different versions of these stories, like all Puranic stories. Puranas are the collections of mythology. And there are many mythological stories and many different versions of them, because they are not meant to be historical fact. They, like all mythology, it has symbolic meaning. And the symbolism in the Puranas and the Ityasas, texts like Ramayana, Mahabharata, they can be interpreted at many different levels. So they are suited, but because they can be interpreted in many different levels, they are suited to people of all levels of spiritual development. That is why Deepavali, for some people, it is the festival of Lakshmi, of wealth, material wealth. Whereas for more spiritually inclined people, it's the festival of light. Light is associated with knowledge, with the eradication of ignorance, of spiritual ignorance. So it can be interpreted in many different ways. And as Shalini was saying, it can be interpreted from an ethical point of view, from a spiritual point of view, from different perspectives and different and different levels. All these things can be interpreted. One year in Deepavali, Bhagavan explained the significance, And of course, when Bhagavan explains the significance, it's the deepest interpretation that can be given to it. So when Bhagavan explained the significance, Murugan wrote 3 verses recording what Bhagavan had said. Those 3 verses are now verses 181 to 183 in Guru Vachaka Kavai. And when Murugan showed those 3 verses to Bhagavan, he summarized the first 2 in another verse. That he summarized 2 verses as 1 verse of his own. And the 3rd verse, he re-expressed the idea in another verse of his own, which expresses the same idea, but in a simpler way than the way Murugan had expressed it. Often Murugan's poetry is it's quite difficult for many people to understand. So Bhagavan would sometimes, when Murugan showed him a verse, Bhagavan would re-express the idea in a simpler way. So there are basically 5 verses recording what Bhagavan's view about Deepavali. 3 verses by Murugan and 2 by Bhagavan himself. All these verses are in Guru Vachaka Kavai, and the 2 verses by Bhagavan are also in another work called Upadesha Tanipaka, which is a collection of 27 verses that Bhagavan wrote on different occasions. It's just a collection of all the verses of teaching that are not included in other main works of Bhagavan. So in Upadesha Tanipaka, there are verses 2 and 3. As I said, Bhagavan will always give the deepest meaning. And so when Bhagavan explains the meaning of Deepavali, well, as when he explains everything, he takes it as representing what is the core of his own teaching. The core of his teachings is that the root of all our problems, of all misery, of all dissatisfaction, is only ego. And ego is nothing but the false awareness of ourself, the awareness of ourself as I am this body. So which is not what we actually are. Yeah, because if this body were what we actually are, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of this body. But we're aware of this body only in the waking state, not in dream. In dream, we're aware of some other body as if it were ourselves. And in sleep, we are not aware of any body at all. So a body cannot be what we actually are, because we are, throughout all the 3 states, we're always aware of ourselves. That is, the fundamental awareness I am shines throughout all the 3 states. This body, the body we now experience as ourselves, appears only in waking. In dream, we experience ourselves as some other body. In sleep, we experience ourselves without experiencing any body at all. So this awareness, I am this body, is a false awareness of ourselves. And this awareness is the very nature of ego. Whenever we rise as ego, we always project and attach ourselves to a body and experience that body as if it were ourselves. So since this is a false awareness of ourselves, it can be eradicated only by correct awareness of ourselves. That is, as Bhagavan often said, the nature of ego is to be aware of itself as I am this. This referring to the body and all the other adjuncts that we identify as ourselves. So I am this or I am that, that is ego. Whereas the nature of, whereas our real nature, our real identity is just I am I. That is, we are not anything other than ourselves. We are not anything other than I. Unfortunately, Bhagavan has used this term nan, which means I am I, in many verses, in many places. Unfortunately, in most English books, it's translated as I-I, because in Tamil, if you say I am this, you say I this. The am is understood there. Likewise, in this, when Bhagavan says nan, though it's just 2 words, I, the am is understood there. I am I. But somehow I don't know why someone started translating it as I-I, which really doesn't have any meaning. What Bhagavan actually meant is I am I. which that is, I am nothing other than myself. It's the implication there. So, so it's that is the correct awareness of ourselves. So it's only correct awareness of ourselves that will destroy the ego, the false awareness of ourselves. This real awareness, this clear, correct awareness of ourselves will shine forth and consume ego only when we investigate ourselves to know what we actually are, and the source from which we've risen as ego. Therefore, Bhagavan took every opportunity to remind us of these core teachings. So when he was asked to explain the significance of Deepavali, he explained it in terms of he explained it as a symbolizing the core of his teachings. As I say, in Tamil Nadu, Deepavali is celebrated as the conquest of a demon called Narakasura by Krishna. And Krishna killed him with his, in most versions it is said, his Sudarshana chakra. Sudarshana chakra is the weapon of Vishnu. It's the most powerful weapon of Vishnu. A chakra means it's a wheel. It's like, it's a disc, basically, a discus. Sudarshana means seeing, the auspicious seeing. So auspicious seeing, according to Bhagavan, is jnana. That is the only auspicious seeing, is to see what we actually are. So Bhagavan refers to it as the disc of jnana. And Bhagavan interprets Naraka as meaning ego. But Naraka is the name of the demon. Naraka also means hell. So in this verse, Bhagavan is using this word Naraka to refer both to a demon and to hell. But in Tamil, we can distinguish the two because the demon is called Narakan. The N is a personal, makes it a personal noun, whereas hell is referred to as Narakam, which is an impersonal, or Naraku, which is an impersonal noun, and therefore refers to hell. So Bhagavan is using the basic Sanskrit word in two forms in here, to refer to a demon and to refer to hell. And Bhagavan equates hell with the body. That is, the abode of the ego is the body. That is, it's only when we identify a body as I, but we rise as ego and simultaneously identify a body as I. In fact, we simultaneously project and identify a body as I. So since this body is the abode of all, that all suffering comes to us, only when we experience ourselves as a body, Bhagavan refers to the body as Narakam. Basically what Bhagavan says in these verses is when Krishna or Narayan, that's another name of Vishnu, kills Naraka, the light that shines forth, that is the light of pure awareness, the light of self-knowledge, Atma-vichara, that is what is symbolized by Deepavali, by the series of lights that are lit. So I'll just go through the verses one by one. To save on time, I won't go into a Tamil verses in detail. I'll just give the meaning. The first verse is verse 181 of Guru Vachika Kavai. In the first sentence, Murugan says, Murugan is recording what Bhagavan says, but Murugan composed the verse. The first sentence, the first line is, they say that Narayana means Narayana, and Lord Vishnu in the form of Krishna, in the form of Krishna in this particular context, but Narayana killed Narakan. Narakan is the demon Narakasura. And then he goes on to explain what is implied by this. So we can, for the purpose of interpreting this verse, we can add in a sentence here, what's the implied meaning of this story told in the Puranas? Then the rest of the verse is an explanation of that. In the second sentence, he says, the one who parades as this hellish body is I, that is ego. It's ego who parades as the hellish body is I. The word ego isn't mentioned here, but it's implied. The one who parades as this hellish body is I is Narakan. That's the demon Narakasura. The one who has killed, again, it's not said what is killed, but it's implied, one who has killed ego, by investigating where is Narakan. Here Narakan is used as a metaphor for ego. By investigating where is Narakan, is that Narayanan who killed Narakan. So basically, what this verse is saying is, Narakan is ego, the one who parades as this hellish body is I. The one who kills ego by investigating where is the Narakan, that is, where is this ego, or that is, when we investigate what this ego is, or where it is, or where it originates from, the one who has killed, by self-investigation, thereby killed ego, that is Narayanan, that is God Narayanan, who killed Narakan. In the second verse, he says, bathing in Jnana. Jnana means real awareness or pure awareness. After killing Narakan, by investigating and reaching the place where Narakan resides, is actually Naraka Chaturdasi Snana. That is the bath traditionally taken before dawn on Naraka Chaturdasi, the 14th day of the waning moon between mid-October and mid-November, which is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan. Actually, I meant to explain a bit about this, the term Naraka Chaturdasi, before coming to explain the verses. That is, in South India, Deepavali is celebrated on the day of Naraka Chaturdasi. Chaturdasi means the 14th moon. In this case, context, it's the 14th waning moon. Naraka Chaturdasi is the 14th waning moon, which is celebrated between mid-October and mid-November. In North India, Diwali is usually celebrated the next day, which is Amavasya. Amavasya is the last day of the waning moon. It's often translated as new moon, but strictly speaking, Amavasya is the last day of the waning moon. So often, in many years, the Deepavali will be celebrated on two different days, depending on which part of India you come from and what tradition you're following. This year, the 2 days happen to fall on the same day because in South India, it is the day when that is the day when Naraka Chaturdasi is in the morning. So actually, according to some calculations, they say yesterday was Naraka Chaturdasi, but Naraka Chaturdasi, each phase of the moon doesn't coincide with the 24-hour clock. It goes, it can, one phase of the moon can, and one day of the moon can end any time in the day. So up to early this morning, it was Naraka Chaturdasi. It's now Amavasya. In North India, when they celebrate on Amavasya, but they do that because their celebrations are mainly in the evening. They do it when the Amavasya is in the evening. So today, the two happen to come together because this morning before dawn was Naraka Chaturdasi, and this evening will be Amavasya. In South India, Naraka Chaturdasi and Deepavali are synonymous. Whereas in North India, they call Naraka Chaturdasi as, I think, Choti Diwali, the small Diwali. And it has, because the festival is celebrated over several days, each day has its own significance. But this varies from place to place in India. So, but coming back to this, what Murugan is, what Bhagavan had explained, and Murugan recorded in this verse, is in South India, it's traditional on the morning of Naraka Chaturdasi, before dawn, to get up and to have an oil bath. The bathing is symbolizing a purification. Here, this is an explanation of what is the significance of this bath, which is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan. So the whole verse is, bathing in Mainyana, real awareness, after killing Narakan, by investigating and reaching the place where Narakan resides, is Naraka Chaturdasi Snana, the bath on Naraka Chaturdasi, which is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan. So here again, I mean, in all these verses, it's emphasizing Bhagavan's teachings. That is, when in order to bathe in real awareness, in pure awareness, and we need to remove the ego. It's only after killing the ego that we can bathe in pure awareness. That is, here bathing symbolizes purification. So when the ego is removed, then that is when we are, everything is washed off by Mainyana, by real awareness. So real awareness brings about the destruction of the ego and thereby cleanses us. So that's the symbolism of the bath that's taken on Naraka Chaturdasi, symbolizes the bathing in Mainyana, which we achieve after the killing of ego, but which is effective by investigating the place where Narakan resides. The place where Narakan resides, here place is used in a metaphorical sense. When we investigate the ego, we can never actually see ego, because we seem to be ego only so long as we are looking at other things. So when we look back to us, to look at ourselves to see what is this ego, ego thereby subsides. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Rudinapadu, Tedinal otum pidicum. It's sought, it takes flight. We can never actually catch this ego because it doesn't actually exist. We seem to be ego only when we're looking away from ourselves. When we look back at ourselves, this ego disappears. So this is what Bhagavan means by investigating and reaching the place where Narakan resides. That is, investigating where is this ego? From where does it arise? So when we investigate it and thereby destroy it, we thereby bathe in real awareness, and that is what is signified by the Naraka Chaturdasi Snana, the bath taken on the morning of Naraka Chaturdasi, which is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan. Again, here, according to Bhagavan, the conquest of Narakan symbolizes the destruction of ego. So Bhagavan then summarized these two verses as a single verse. What Bhagavan says in his verses, he who killed Narakan with the discus of jnana, by investigating where is Narakan, who rules the world of Naraka, hell, as this hellish body is I, is Narayanan. I mean, Narayanan. That day, when he killed him, is the holy day of Naraka Chaturdasi, which is the day, as I say, that's the day on which Deepavali is celebrated in South India. So here Bhagavan talks about Narayanan, Vishnu, Krishna, killing Naraka. Well, as I say, but in many of the stories, it is said that Narakasura was killed by Krishna, that Krishna used his Sudarshana chakra to kill Narakan. Sudarshana means the auspicious vision. According to Bhagavan, the auspicious vision is only jnana. So here Bhagavan refers to the Sudarshana chakra as the discus of jnana. And it's by that means, here jnana means knowledge in the sense of pure self-awareness. So it's only by the pure self-awareness that we are able to kill the ego, Narakan. And when we kill this ego, we are then Narayan, the God, in other words. And Bhagavan describes the ego as Narakan, and he says it rules the world of Naraka, that means hell, as this hellish body is I. So that's that verse. Then in the verse 183 of Guru Vachaka Kavai, meaning of that is, as I said, this is another verse by Murugana, but recording what Bhagavan said. Be clear that the eternal blazing forth of oneself, that means oneself here means one's real nature, the vast, infinite, great, supreme, that's a word in apposition describing the nature of oneself, which shines after killing abhasa. Abhasa means a semblance or a reflection. It's here referring to chittabhasa. Chittabhasa means the semblance of awareness or reflection of awareness, which is the ego. That is, ego isn't real awareness, it's only a semblance of awareness. Real awareness is only the pure awareness. So ego is a semblance of awareness. It can also be interpreted as a reflection of awareness. Whereas when we see our reflection in the mirror, that reflection is a semblance of ourselves. It's not actually ourselves, but it seems like ourselves in all the features and everything, even though it is not ourselves. So, as I say, abhasa means both semblance and reflection. It means the chittabhasa, the reflection or semblance of awareness, which is ego. So, so I'll go back to the beginning of the verse again, because I was just explaining what abhasa means. Be clear that the eternal blazing forth of oneself, which shines after killing abhasa, namely ego, by oneself investigating Narakan, again Narakan here means ego, who had degenerated by taking as I the filthy Naraka, the filthy hell, which is the form of a body, a coalescence of flesh, is what is signified by Dīpāvali. So in this verse, this is an explanation of what Dīpāvali is. Dīpāvali, as I say, Dīpāvali means the series of lights. So it's the festival of light. So what is the light that it is symbolized? As Shalini was saying earlier, light can be interpreted in many ways. It can be the conquest of, that is light over darkness, can be the conquest of good over evil, or it can be interpreted in many ways. But the deepest meaning of light, the meaning that Bhagavan gives here, it's the shining forth of ourself, as I am I, as the shining forth of our real nature. When ego is destroyed, what shines forth is, that is, we are not aware of ourselves as, we are always aware of ourselves, but we seem to be not aware of ourselves as we actually are, because though we are aware of ourselves, we're now aware of ourselves as I am this body. So long as we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So when this ego, the false awareness I am this body, is eradicated, what shines forth is the real awareness of ourselves. So that is that light of pure awareness that shines forth when ego is destroyed. That is what is signified by Dīpāvali. The words what is signified by are not actually here. Bhagavan said that blazing forth of oneself is Dīpāvali. That's the true Dīpāvali. And then in the next verse, this is Bhagavan summarized, or that is re-expressed the idea that had been expressed by Murugana, but in a somewhat simpler way. That is what Bhagavan says in the verse he composed is, shining as oneself. Oneself here means one's own real nature. After investigating and killing the great sinner who is Narakan, who was downfallen by taking as I the illusory or miserable body abode, which is the form of Naraka, hell, is what is signified by Dīpāvali. And he ends with the word teli. Teli means actually Murugan also used the word teli at the end. Teli means be clear. That implies consider this clearly, investigate this clearly, or know this clearly. So be clear that this is the case. So what Deepavali actually is nothing but the shining forth of oneself when ego is destroyed. So as I said, Bhagavan takes every opportunity to deal in the core of his teaching. The core of his teachings is we are always aware of ourselves as we actually are. But because we have risen as ego and taken ourselves to be, of course, our real nature is never affected by the rising of ego. Our real nature neither appears nor disappears. It is ever as it is. But we have risen as this false entity ego, and as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. Because we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. What we actually are is only the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. So I am alone, that is the true self-knowledge. But as soon as it is mixed with adjuncts as I am this body, we are no longer aware of ourselves as we actually are, because we're aware of ourselves as something which is not what we actually are, namely this body. So what Bhagavan is emphasizing in these verses is when we investigate ourselves and thereby annihilate ego, what then shines forth, the light of pure awareness, that is the real significance of Deepavali.